As I mentioned in my shonen video, I don't really give a shit about power-based shonen. I feel that most shonen shows repeat the same elements, have no sense of narrative progression, and ditch the good elements in favour of more boring fights. However, it appears I'm in the minority here because a lot of people really do like the big three in Dragon Ball. When I ask people why they like these kinds of shows, they normally reply with something like, the fight scenes are really good. After informing these people that they have shit taste and then wondering why they have girlfriends and I don't, I thought, what makes a good fight scene? Now, the first thing to consider is build up. Now, to exhibit how build up for a fight can be done well, it's time for another installment of begrudgingly talking about my relationship with Fairy Tail. For those who cannot remember, my relationship with Fairy Tail is this. Now, for the most part, fairy tale fights don't have that spectacular build-up. Normally it's just someone's a bit of a dickhead for half an arc and then Natsu decides to punch them in the face really hard because in-betweeners reference. However, one fairy tale fight with good build-up is Natsu versus Sting and Rogue. One good thing the build-up does is that it allows us to sympathize with the antagonists of this fight. We know that the consequences if either side loses will be disastrous, so it allows us to become invested. Also, I quite like Natsu's stubborn means of setting up the fight. It doesn't feel like the Nakama trash we're forced to sit through at the end of every arc, but instead the good old fuck you, come fight me type of Natsu that we've grown to love over the series. Now, the actual meat of the fight isn't all that interesting, but if you want to know how to make it interesting, there's two possible ways you can. First of all, making the action realistic. Now, if you want good examples of realistic fights, then look no further than Samurai Champloo. Basically, every fight from there could fit this bill, but for the sake of non-spoilers, I'll just talk about the first fight between Mugen and Jin. One thing this fight values is fluidity, and this is complemented amazingly by the camera work. The camera focuses on both Mugen and Jin at the same time, which shows that they are both equal in skill, and this is a battle to determine this. However, the other way you can make the fight itself good is by doing the complete opposite and just being batshit crazy. As an example of how to do the batshit crazy fight, I'm going to use Homura vs the Walpurgis Knight from Puella Magi Madoka Magica as an example. Instead of being a show of skill like Mugen vs Jin was, this one is a show of pure power. Once again, the camera work also takes light of this, as it shows each character's attacks separately. For the first half of the fight, we see Homura turn the show into Puella Magi Madoka Michael Bay, and Studio Shaft even slip in their own logo. However, then the camera shifts to the Walpurgis' attack, showing that it definitely is the being that's so powerful it can destroy entire realities, and yet it has a name that sounds like an STD. At some points throughout the fight, you might want to sprinkle a bit of dialogue in there, but you've got to be careful where you place it, because there's no point in starting a fight, pausing it, then doing half an episode's worth of flashback before building up to a disappointing conclusion. Black Clover! Now, if you want to insert dialogue, I suggest you do it once all the main action of the fight is over and the fight is drawing to a conclusion, like they did in Soul Eater with Maka vs Krona. The fight itself takes up most of episode 20. However, this talking at the end of the fight is put into episode 21, so we get a kind of equivalent exchange between talking and fighting. Did somebody say equivalent exchange?
Holy shit, my Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood poster can talk, and what's more, it kinda sounds like me doing an impersonation of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars.
Good. Now talk about how great I am.
No, as good as you are, I'm not going to talk about you, and you can do nothing to convince—
Do it.
Curses, he knew about my susceptibility to over-abused memes. Fine, I'll talk about you.
Now, of course, the last thing to consider is actually tying into a fight's narrative purpose in its conclusion. In order to exhibit this, I'm going to talk about the conclusion to the fight between Wrath and Scar from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, I could have talked about this fight for any aspect which I've just mentioned in this video, but to keep it fair, I'll just talk about the conclusion. At the end of the fight, Bradley is on the verge of death at the hands of Scar, the man who he took everything from. Now, he could have just died there and then, and he still would have been satisfied, but then the show goes one step further by having him give a monologue into his inner humanity. This works a nice way to show Scar overcoming wrath, both literally and figuratively. So, for me to enjoy a fight, it must respect these 4 steps, but if it doesn't, then there is one other way it can be good, and that way is be One Punch Man. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.